everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Emma, and as always, I'm here with Jake. Jake, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Emma. Thanks for asking. I actually had a really peaceful morning, which is kind of rare for me, so I'm in a great mood.
Oh, a peaceful morning. I love that. And actually, that leads us perfectly into what we're talking about today, which is self-care routines. Jake, when you hear the phrase self-care, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Honestly, my first thought used to be like face masks and bubble baths. You know, the stuff you see in those relaxing spa commercials. But I've learned that self-care is so much broader than that. It's basically anything you do intentionally to take care of your mental, physical, or emotional health.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's such an important point. Intentionally. It's not just about doing something nice. It's about being aware that you're doing it for yourself, for your well-being. So, Jake, do you actually have a self-care routine, or is it more like something you do randomly?
I'd say it's somewhere in between, honestly. I have a few things I do pretty consistently, like every day, but I'm not super rigid about it. I don't follow a strict schedule. Some people do, and that works great for them, but I personally find that too much structure makes it feel like a chore.
That's a really good distinction. Rigid, meaning very strict, very fixed, versus something more flexible. And I think a lot of people feel that way. When something becomes too structured, it stops feeling like self-care and starts feeling like another task on your to-do list.
Exactly. It loses that sense of, restoration? Like, the whole point is that it restores you. It gives you energy back. If it's stressing you out, you're kind of defeating the purpose.
Defeating the purpose. I love that phrase. It means you're doing the opposite of what you intended. Like if someone goes to the gym to relax, but comes home more stressed than before.
Right. And I've definitely been guilty of that. I went through this phase where I was so obsessed with my fitness routine that it stopped being healthy. I was tracking every single calorie, every step, every minute of sleep, and I was more anxious than ever.
Wow, that sounds exhausting. So what changed? How did you kind of pull back from that?
I think I just hit a wall. That's an idiom. Hitting a wall means you reach a point where you can't keep going the way you've been going. Your body or your mind just says, nope, enough. And I realized that the obsession itself was the problem, not the solution.
That's such a relatable experience though, right? Because a lot of people get into self-care with really good intentions and then somehow turn it into another source of pressure. It's like we can't help but make everything competitive or performative.
Performative. That's a great word. It means you're doing something more for the appearance of it, to look like you're doing it, rather than for the actual benefit. And social media has made that so much worse, honestly.
Oh, don't even get me started on that. I went through a whole phase of posting my morning routines on social media, and at some point, I realized I was waking up early not because it felt good, but because I wanted the content. Oh, it's a bit embarrassing to admit.
No, that's so honest, though. And I think a lot of people can relate. The 5 a.m. club trend, where everyone is waking up at 5 in the morning and doing all these things, it works for some people, but it became this whole identity thing online.
Right. It became almost like a status symbol. Like, I wake up at 5 and meditate and journal and go for a run before most people are even awake. And if you don't do that, you feel like you're somehow falling behind.
Which is the opposite of what self-care should feel like. Self-care shouldn't make you feel like you're falling behind or not doing enough. It should feel like you're giving yourself what you need.
Beautifully said. Okay, so let's get into the actual routines. Tell me about your morning. What does a good morning look like for Jake?
Okay, so on a good morning, and I want to emphasize good, because not every morning is like this, I wake up without immediately grabbing my phone. That's the big one for me. I try to give myself at least 15 to 20 minutes before I look at any screens.
That's harder than it sounds, honestly.
I know so many people, including myself sometimes, who literally open their eyes and the first thing they do is check their phone. It's almost like a reflex at this point.
It is a reflex, and it's a habit that kind of sneaks up on you. Sneaks up on you means it develops gradually without you really noticing. One day you realize you've been doing it for years and you don't even remember starting.
So what do you do instead of reaching for your phone in those first few minutes?
Usually I just lie there for a moment. I know that sounds boring, but I just let myself wake up slowly. Sometimes I think about what I'm looking forward to that day, or I just notice how I'm feeling. Am I tired? Am I tense? Am I actually rested? Just a little check-in with myself.
I really like that, a check-in. Like you're asking yourself, hey, how are you actually doing before the world starts demanding things from you? I think that's so underrated as a practice.
Totally underrated. And then after that, I usually make coffee, which is non-negotiable for me. That is sacred. Don't mess with my morning coffee.
Okay, the coffee is protected. I respect that. Do you do anything while you drink your coffee, or is it just about the coffee itself?
Honestly, I try to just drink it. Not read, not scroll, not watch anything. Just sit with the coffee. And I know that sounds almost too simple, but there's something really grounding about it. Grounding means it makes you feel connected to the present moment, centered, stable.
I love that word, grounded. And it's interesting because so many of us have forgotten how to just sit with something without multitasking. We feel like we have to be consuming content or being productive every single second.
And that constant need to be productive is actually really draining. It's exhausting to always be on. Self-care, in a lot of ways, is about allowing yourself to be off for a bit.
That's such a good reframe. Okay, so after the coffee, what's next for you?
It depends on the day. If I have time, I'll go for a walk. Even just a 15-minute walk outside makes such a difference for my mood. I think it's something about being in natural light and moving your body gently, without it being a workout.
There's actually a lot of research behind that. Morning light and how it affects your mood and your sleep later on, it helps regulate your body clock. But even without knowing the science, most people just feel better after some fresh air.
Exactly. You don't need to know the science. Your body just tells you. It's one of those things where you notice the difference on the days you don't do it.
Right, you feel it in the absence of it. Okay, I want to talk about my morning routine too because it's actually very different from yours. And I think it's good for listeners to hear different approaches.
Yes, please. Tell me everything.
So I am not a morning person. I want to be very clear about that. I used to really beat myself up about it. Beat yourself up means to be very self-critical. Because all the advice out there seems to assume that good self-care means waking up early.
And it really doesn't. Night owls, people who naturally prefer staying up late and sleeping in, can absolutely have incredible self-care routines. It just might look different.
Exactly. So my mornings are slower. I need a longer runway. A longer runway. Like a plane needs enough runway to take off. I need more time and space before I'm ready to fully function.
I love that metaphor. A longer runway. It's very relatable.
So I don't set an alarm unless I absolutely have to. When I wake up naturally, I do something Jake actually mentioned. I don't check my phone right away. I've gotten better at that. And then I make tea. I'm a tea person, not coffee. And I usually read something for pleasure. Not news, not work-related. Fiction, or sometimes poetry.
Oh, that's lovely. Reading in the morning before everything else starts? It feels really intentional. Like you're filling up your own cup before you start pouring into everything else.
Filling up your own cup. Yes! That's actually a phrase a lot of people use in wellness spaces. The idea that you can't give to others if you're running on empty yourself. You have to take care of yourself first.
It sounds a little selfish on the surface, but it's really not. If you're exhausted and depleted, you're not going to be a good partner, a good friend, a good employee, whatever role you're trying to fill.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift a little and talk about evening routines, because I think a lot of people focus on mornings, but evenings are just as important, maybe even more so for some people.
I actually think evenings are where I've done more work lately, honestly. I used to be really bad at winding down. Winding down means gradually relaxing and slowing down, like a clock that's running out of energy.
That's such a good phrase. And what does winding down look like for you now compared to before?
Before, I would just watch TV or scroll my phone until I fell asleep, literally in bed with my phone, watching videos and then wondering why I couldn't sleep well. Looking back, it seems so obvious.
But that's most people. That is genuinely what most people do. The phone in bed is almost universal at this point.
It really is. So now I try to stop looking at screens about an hour before I want to sleep. I know, everyone says this and it's hard. But even doing it a few times a week has made a noticeable difference.
What do you do instead during that hour?
I've gotten into reading before bed, which I know sounds very old-fashioned, but it genuinely helps me fall asleep. I also sometimes do a bit of light stretching, nothing intense, just to release the tension from sitting at a desk all day.
Stretching is so underrated as a self-care practice. People think exercise has to be intense to count, but gentle movement, a slow walk, some stretching, yoga, can be incredibly beneficial, both physically and mentally.
And it's accessible, right? You don't need a gym membership or special equipment. You can stretch in your living room in your pajamas, and it still counts.
Pajama stretching is absolutely a valid wellness practice. I fully endorse it.
Certified self-care right there.
Okay, let's talk about something that I think gets overlooked a lot in conversations about self-care, and that's the emotional and social side of it. Because we've talked a lot about routines and habits, but self-care isn't always about what you do alone.
Oh, that's such a good point. I think for a long time I thought of self-care as very solo, like it was all about me by myself doing things. But actually, spending quality time with people you love and trust is also self-care. Connection is a human need.
Absolutely. And sometimes the most caring thing you can do for yourself is cancel plans when you're overwhelmed, but other times it's actually making yourself go, even when you don't feel like it, because you know you'll feel better afterward.
That's a tricky balance, isn't it? Knowing when to push yourself a little and when to genuinely rest. I think that takes a lot of self-awareness to figure out.
Self-awareness. Being aware of your own feelings, needs, and behaviors. It's almost like a skill that you develop over time. And I don't think anyone gets it perfectly right. I certainly don't.
Same. There are definitely times I've canceled plans thinking I needed rest and then just felt lonely and worse. And times I've dragged myself out thinking I didn't want to go and ended up having a wonderful time.
Right. It's not always easy to know what you actually need in the moment. Which brings me to something I wanted to ask you about. Journaling. Do you journal? Because I know that's a popular self-care tool.
I have tried journaling several times in my life. Several times. I always start strong and then trail off after about 2 weeks. But I think even those 2 weeks were valuable. I learned something about myself each time.
I think there's this pressure to do things consistently forever, or it doesn't count. But even doing something for a short period can give you real insight or benefit. It doesn't have to be a lifelong daily habit.
Exactly. And journaling doesn't have to be like writing pages and pages of deep reflection. For some people, it's just jotting down 3 things they're grateful for, or writing a quick note about how they felt that day. It can be very simple.
I journal on and off, more during stressful periods in my life, actually. When things are going smoothly, I tend to do it less. But when I'm going through something difficult, putting it into words on paper really helps me process it.
That makes a lot of sense. Writing things down can help you get them out of your head. There's something about externalizing your thoughts, putting them outside of yourself, that makes them feel more manageable.
Externalizing. Yes. Getting it out of the loop in your mind and onto the page. And then you can look at it more objectively, almost like you're looking at someone else's problem.
Which can give you a lot of clarity. Clarity, a clearer understanding, being able to see something more clearly. I find I often understand how I'm really feeling only after I've talked about it or written about it.
That's really interesting. So the act of expressing it through talking or writing actually helps you understand it, not the other way around.
Yeah, I used to think you had to understand your feelings before you could talk about them. But often it's the talking or writing itself that creates the understanding.
That's almost a bit philosophical, but it's so true. Okay, I want to ask about something a little more specific. Mental health and self-care. Because I think sometimes people treat self-care as a substitute for professional mental health support, and I want to talk about where that line is.
That's a really important distinction to make. Self-care is genuinely valuable, and it absolutely supports mental health. But it's not a replacement for therapy or professional help when that's what someone needs.
Right. You can't meditate your way out of clinical depression. And I think sometimes the wellness industry, the whole world of apps and routines and products around self-care, can accidentally send the message that if you just do the right things, you'll be fine.
And that can actually make people feel worse. Like, I'm doing everything right. I'm sleeping well. I'm exercising. I'm journaling. Why do I still feel bad? And the answer might be that they need more support than habits can provide.
Exactly. And there's no shame in that. Therapy, for example, is one of the most powerful forms of self-care there is. It's just taking care of your mental health with professional support.
And I'll say personally, I've been in therapy at different points in my life, and it's made a huge difference. It gave me tools to understand myself and my patterns in a way that no morning routine ever could.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Jake. I think normalizing therapy is so important, especially for people who grew up in cultures or families where asking for help was seen as weakness.
Completely. There's still a stigma. And stigma means a kind of social shame or negative attitude around mental health support in many places. But that's slowly changing, which is great.
It is changing, slowly but surely. Okay, let's come back to some practical stuff. I want to ask about something that affects self-care a lot, and that's work. How do you maintain a self-care routine when life gets really busy?
Oh, this is the real challenge, isn't it? Because it's easy to have a beautiful routine when things are calm. The test is whether you can maintain even a small version of it when everything is hectic.
Hectic. Really busy and chaotic. And I think most of us know that feeling of like, my self-care routine has completely fallen apart because I have so much going on.
And I think the key insight I've had is to think about what the minimum viable version is. Minimum viable, the smallest amount that still gives you benefit. So instead of a full hour of morning routine, maybe it's just 5 minutes of quiet with your coffee. And that still counts.
I love that framing. It's not all or nothing. Even a little bit maintains the habit and gives you some benefit. And it's so much easier to rebuild a full routine from a small foundation than to start from zero.
Exactly. It's like keeping a pilot light on. A pilot light is the small, constant flame that keeps a gas appliance ready to work. You're just keeping that small flame going so you can turn it up when life allows.
Oh, that's such a lovely metaphor. Keeping the pilot light on. I might steal that.
Please do. It's not mine originally, but it's stuck with me.
Okay, I want to talk about one more aspect of self-care that I think is really interesting, and that's the relationship between self-care and boundaries. Because a lot of self-care is actually about protecting your time and energy.
Yes, absolutely.
And boundaries is one of those words that gets used a lot, sometimes to the point where people roll their eyes at it. But it's actually a really fundamental concept.
Can you explain what you mean by boundaries in this context for listeners who might not be super familiar with it?
Sure. A boundary is basically a limit you set around your time, your energy, or your emotional well-being. Like saying, I don't answer work emails after 7 p.m. That's a boundary. Or, I'm not going to spend time with people who consistently make me feel bad about myself. That's also a boundary.
And setting those limits is a form of self-care because it protects the resources you need, time, energy, emotional capacity, so you actually have something left to take care of yourself with.
Exactly. You can have the most beautiful morning routine in the world, but if you have no boundaries and you say yes to everything and everyone constantly drains you, you'll still be exhausted.
I think saying no is one of the hardest but most important self-care practices. And it's something a lot of people, especially people who tend to be caregivers or people pleasers, really struggle with.
It is hard, and there's often guilt involved. I feel bad saying no, but I think it helps to reframe it. When you say no to something that doesn't serve you, you're saying yes to something that does. You're making space.
Making space. I love that phrase. Creating room for the things that matter. And I think that's actually a beautiful way to think about self-care as a whole. It's not indulgence. It's not selfish. It's creating the space and the capacity to live well and show up for the people and things you care about.
Well said. And I'd add, it looks different for everyone. There is no one-size-fits-all self-care routine. Someone's perfect self-care might be a long solo hike. Another person's might be cooking a big meal with family. Both are valid.
Completely valid. Which is why I think the most important first step is actually figuring out what genuinely restores you. What activities, what environments, what kinds of connection fill you up rather than drain you.
And that requires a bit of self-reflection and experimentation. Trying things, noticing how you feel, and adjusting. It's an ongoing process.
It really is. Okay, I want to do a quick round of, let's call it, self-care non-negotiables. What are the 2 or 3 things that you absolutely will not give up, even when life is at its busiest?
Okay, mine are sleep. I protect my sleep fiercely, and I'm not ashamed about it. Second, some form of movement every day, even if it's just that short walk. And third, and this might surprise people, I need some alone time every day. Even just 30 minutes of being by myself with no demands on me.
Oh, that's so real. Especially for people who are more introverted. And introverted means you recharge your energy through solitude rather than social interaction. Alone time isn't being antisocial. It's genuinely necessary.
And even extroverts, people who get energy from being around others, need some downtime too. We all do, just maybe in different amounts.
Absolutely. My non-negotiables are reading, even just a few pages, every day, moving my body in some way, and honestly, a proper meal. Not something grabbed on the go, but actually sitting down and eating something nourishing. That one surprises people sometimes.
No, that makes so much sense. Eating well and giving yourself time to actually enjoy a meal is a form of self-respect, isn't it? It's saying, I'm worth taking a break for.
Exactly. Food is so tied to self-care, and yet it often gets reduced to just nutrition. Calories in, calories out. But the act of cooking for yourself or sitting down for a meal is so much more than that.
It can be meditative, even. There's something about the process of preparing food, chopping vegetables, following a recipe, that I find really grounding. It keeps you in the present moment.
Yes, cooking as mindfulness. I completely agree. And speaking of mindfulness, we haven't actually talked much about meditation or mindfulness practices directly. Do you meditate?
I've gone through phases with meditation.
Right now, I wouldn't say I have a formal meditation practice, but I do try to be more mindful throughout the day. Just pausing, taking a breath, noticing what's around me. More like little moments than sitting down for 20 minutes.
That's actually what a lot of mindfulness teachers call informal practice, bringing a mindful quality to everyday activities rather than setting aside a formal time. It's much more sustainable for a lot of people.
And less intimidating. I think meditation can feel like a big, serious, spiritual thing that requires a lot of effort. But just pausing and taking 3 slow breaths when you feel stressed, that's accessible to everyone.
And it's remarkably effective. The science on slow, deep breathing and its effect on the nervous system is really solid. It genuinely calms you down in a matter of seconds.
The nervous system, specifically the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part that handles rest and recovery. When you breathe slowly and deeply, you're essentially signaling to your body that it's safe to relax. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really is. Okay, we're getting close to wrapping up, which I can't believe because I feel like we could talk about this for hours. But I want to end with something positive and practical. If a listener is hearing this and thinking, okay, I want to start taking better care of myself, but I don't know where to begin, what would you say to them?
I'd say start with one thing. Not a whole routine, not a complete lifestyle overhaul. Just pick one small thing that sounds genuinely appealing to you. Not something you think you should do. And try it for a week. See how it feels. Build from there.
That's perfect advice. Small, sustainable, personal. Don't compare yourself to someone else's routine. Don't try to do everything at once. And most importantly, be kind to yourself in the process. Self-care is an act of self-compassion, and that has to start with how you talk to and treat yourself.
And give yourself permission to rest without having earned it. You don't have to be productive enough or busy enough or stressed enough to deserve to take care of yourself. You deserve it just because you're human.
That gave me chills a little bit. That's such a good note to end on. You deserve to take care of yourself simply because you're human. Full stop.
I'll take the chills as a win.
Absolutely a win. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. I really hope this conversation gave you some ideas, some comfort, maybe a little push to prioritize your own well-being. Remember, self-care doesn't have to be perfect or elaborate or expensive. It just has to be intentional and genuinely for you.
And if you want to practice your English while you work on your self-care, well, you're already doing it by listening to this. So give yourself credit for that. Seriously.
Jake is absolutely right. Learning a language is also a form of growth and self-investment. So well done for being here. We'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves, everyone.
Bye, everyone. And remember, keep that pilot light on.
Keep that pilot light on. See you soon.